Welcome to another episode of Women Leaders, Tales, Trails, and Truths, the podcast where we uncover the inspiring stories, journeys, and insights of successful women. Join us each month as we explore the paths that they've taken, the challenges they've overcome, and the truths they discovered along the way. So whether you're seeking inspiration, guidance, or a deep understanding of what it takes to lead, you're in the right place. Let's dive into this next episode. So today we're joined in the Warwick Innovation District studio by Louise Ainsworth. She is the chair of the advisory board for Warwick Business School, an independent member of the University of Warwick's Governing Council, and former CEO of Kantar Media for Europe, Africa, and Middle East. And she's a University of Warwick alumna, and she's here to share her tales, trails, and truths. A very warm welcome to the podcast, Louise.
Well, thank you so much, Penny, for asking me to be here. I'm very excited.
Well, you know how excited I am to have you here because I've admired you and your amazing career for such a long time.
I hope I live up to expectations.
I'm sure you will. And yeah, this is saying it's a treat is a complete understatement. So thank you. So I have so many questions to ask you, but if we can just start with this, how have you enjoyed a bit of freedom the last few months since leaving your CEO role of 6 years at Kantar?
Well, I think you probably know the answer to this. I've had an absolutely lovely break. I mean, I've been working pretty well non-stop since I started my career very many years ago, and with a couple of pauses for maternity leave, but I think we all know that maternity leave isn't so much of a break as starting something new. So I have really, really had a good time, some holidays, lots of exercise, some personal projects, and really doing some groundwork as to think about what I want to do next.
Oh, well, that sounds so nice, I have to admit. It sounds wonderful to have that time. And after years in leadership, just taking that time to recharge a little bit and reflect. So is there anything that you've particularly learned from that, do you think?
Yes, definitely. So we've had the opportunity, having this break, to do some things that we wanted to do from our bucket list, and one of them was going on safari and just having that time in nature with the wildlife, and them just living their lives and getting on with it. It really enables you to take a step back, and I think that was a fantastic opportunity, and it just reminds you. I think the phrase is, you're not the main character. You know, life goes on. You put everything in perspective. I've also spent some time helping out at a local food bank. And again, you know, just meeting the people there, hearing about their lives, it just reminds you that, you know, there is a much bigger picture, and we're just a small cog in that.
So true. I mean, and the power of perspective is so powerful, I think. But a safari, spending time helping out at the food bank, I mean, that sounds so rewarding too. That sounds awesome. So as you know, Louise, I've been really, really interested in your career path, and it would be great to have to hear more about what led you to take those roles and what you've done and what other women and men who might be listening, how they can learn from that. But let's start off with your education and how you took your first steps into the world of work.
Gosh, it was so quite a while ago. But I studied engineering and economics at university, and I got into engineering really because I just loved the fact that you could model what's happening in the world. I love the idea that you could predict what was going to happen, and that sort of getting under the skin of how things work, and that sort of curiosity has been right at the heart of my journey all the way through. So not only on the engineering side, but then of course with economics as well, understanding how the economy comes together and how these sort of macro factors play together. So it was my first degree, and then I came to Warwick to do a master's in MSOR, and of course at Warwick, you know, have a fantastic capability in this area, and so really built knowledge and skills in what we'd now call probably data science, but again, forecasting, understanding how you can predict what's going to be going on in the world. And that was very much the route that I thought I'd be taking. I was recruited to go to Shell, to go into what was then their scenario planning team. But I didn't make it into that team because as I went into the graduate sort of entry program, they decided that my personality was better suited to the general management side of things. So I went into a general track, into a role in Shell International where I was working in the aviation sector, the marine sector, and generally in trading. So again, just understanding how the world works, how industry works, was absolutely fascinating to me. And that curiosity kind of drove me to get there.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. What a way to start. So after 5 years at Shell, you decided to pursue an MBA. What kind of drove that decision?
Well, again, it was the curiosity. I mean, I loved what I was doing at Shell, and I was traveling, as I mentioned, a lot. So, at that age, it's just amazing to have the opportunity to go to all these remote parts of the world. But I really wanted to just see what was happening in other sectors and understand a wider industry perspective. So very much the content was what motivated me to go into do the MBA.
Sounds great. So tell me a little bit more about what you learned on the MBA and how it impacted your career. And perhaps listeners might want some advice for women who are considering a similar step.
Well, for me, it was about the content, actually. And of course, I learned the things that I expected. I mean, maybe even more, because it wasn't just learning about how different industries work, but also the drivers, how you unpack what actually makes a business or an organization successful. So really going into the weeds on some of that was very interesting indeed, and also the breadth of the content. But I think what actually was much more compelling, I hadn't thought about it before, was the network and the community and the friends that have become friends for life that I made at business school. And we really are still connected after all these years. We shared such an impactful moment. I think most people who've been through a similar experience would know what I'm talking about. So that sense of being part of something was really incredible. And then I think the last piece was the sort of self-knowledge. And I do know that business schools are working even more on this now to help people as they're at a really important moment in their career, just get under the skin of what motivates them, what they bring, and how they can really enhance and play to their strengths and be an authentic person in the workplace. So, yeah, it's a great experience.
So true about how leadership seems to be focusing on, number one, leading yourself and that deep self-awareness that you discussed before you can lead others in an organization, perhaps. So, and it sounds like you've had a great year doing your MBA and you connected with new people and forged those really meaningful long-term relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
You learned a lot. What did you do next?
So after my MBA, like a lot of people were doing certainly then, I went into consulting. So I worked for Bain & Company, the strategy firm. And I was given the great chance to work on a range of different industries, and I also had the opportunity to spend 6 months in South Africa, which was really amazing experience to be able to support the nation at that time. So learned a huge amount at Bain, and not only on the projects and learning about the clients and the kind of industries, but also about how to organize, how to project manage, how to bring knowledge workers together and get the most out of them under pressure, because often you're working to very tight deadlines in strategy firms. So a really fantastic learning experience. One of the areas that I did quite a few projects in was in the media side, and this was in the mid-90s, so we were starting to see the internet was really beginning to be a thing, and that's really what triggered the interest in digital media and innovation that's driven so much of my career since then, that kind of transformation using digital. So in fact, after Bain, I was contacted by the BBC and went to work at the BBC as a strategist, looking at what the future was going to be for digital within the BBC, which was an incredible learning experience as well.
Can you share any insights as to what has sparked your journey, and what have you looked for when moving to new roles? You've already talked a little bit about that, but if you can expand, that would be great.
Yes, so I think the thing that's really driven my journey has been this wanting to learn more about how industries work and get under the skins of how to make them more successful. So really unpicking the business model, if you like, right down to the detail of what's driving revenue, what's driving cost, and how do you bring that together. And I think one of the things that I've really learned over time has been that it's about the industry, yes, it's about the nuts and bolts and the structures and the systems and the processes, but it's also about the people and how people work and the behaviours. And so that's really what's triggered me to want to be more of a leader and a better leader, and that's what's sort of driven that part of my story.
Yeah, I think curiosity is so important for you. It seems like a guiding force in a way, always wanting to know. And it's one of our values here at the university, as you know. So you worked with some really well-known companies. Would you say you've got a curiosity itch then? I
definitely do. Okay. And you know, it's what motivates me. I don't think that necessarily everybody has to move as much as I've moved. After the BBC, I went into a digital agency, built some websites, then got into digital marketing, digital advertising, worked for a big agency group, Ogilvy Group, bringing digital into the mix. Then made the leap into research. I worked at Nielsen, at Walk, and more recently, as mentioned, at Kantar. So really just trying to understand how businesses work.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about leadership and how you've evolved as a leader over the years. So when did you take on that first leadership role, and what can our listeners learn from that?
So my first leadership role was actually, I've been working for quite a while before I had a team. And I think but you can start to lead really at any stage in your career. And I like to talk to my teams about something I call everyday leadership, which is the way in which we can all, wherever we sit in the organisation, can help motivate and inspire the people around us through the ways in which we interact with them. And it can be something very, very simple and small, like just smiling or making a joke or just lightening the mood and making the workplace a nicer place to be. Or it can be something really concrete and constructive, suggesting improvements or coming up with ideas and just contributing to the overall organisation. So leadership doesn't have to wait until you're in your first leadership job. And certainly I feel that I was, like many people on the team, contributing well before I took on my first leadership role. But I did take on a leadership role when I was in a digital agency in the early 2000s. And it was actually a really difficult time to become a leader because having been through what was called the dot-com boom, we then had what was called the dot-com downturn. And there was a lot of consolidation in the industry. Clients had realized perhaps some of the big ideas that were being brought through in digital were not quite delivering in terms of the revenues and the profitability. And so there was a lot of retrenchment. And unfortunately, in my first leadership jobs, I did have to let people go and reduce force, or reduction in force as they call it. And that was a really difficult learning experience for me because obviously as a leader you sometimes do have to make difficult choices, and it wasn't an enjoyable process for any of us. But we did do our very best to make it respectful and to make it fair. And, I know that a lot of the people, I'm still in touch with a lot of people who left at that time, and I am happy that they have had great careers since then. So, life moved on. But it is part of what you learn as a leader, that you can't please everybody all of the time.
So I know that you've been leading, though, in very kind of difficult times. So you've been leading businesses through financial crises. There's been Brexit, of course, the pandemic, cost of living. So what advice do you have as to how to lead in difficult, challenging times like these?
So what my advice would be, the first thing that matters is to have a plan. So you need to know, we talked earlier about those drivers of revenue, those drivers of cost. You need to really get into the detail of the business or the organisation and understand how the crisis is going to impact what you're doing. So, for example, in COVID, we did a very granular analysis of all of our clients and the top 600 clients, I think, to see exactly where we thought each of them was going to be so that we could get ahead of the conversation with them about what was going to happen and where our revenue streams would go. And we also did something similar on the cost side, and had to move operationally very quickly. So having that really concrete plan and understanding how it could be affected is really important. But from a leadership point of view, it's also about the clarity that you give to people. So being really clear on how they can contribute to that plan and trying to eliminate as much of the ambiguity and anxiety, recognize the context, explain how what they do fits in, and just helping to take it forward from there.
Yeah, the clarity is so important, but it also must be a little stressful. And I would imagine that you need to try to sound and be calm when you're leading a team.
Yes,
any
absolutely.
Guidance on how to do that?
Well, I think you're right. Just being calm, and I think having that plan helps. Mm-hmm. And I think the job of the leader is to try and create as calm and reassuring environment as you possibly can, and to create that path that people can take around them.
What are your reflections on leading as a woman, and what advice do you have for women out there listening to us, especially in companies which maybe are more male-dominant?
So, well, the first thing I should say really is that I have always, through my career, really been supported by the men who I work with. And in fact, every leadership role that I've had, I've been given by a man. So, I don't think this is about men not supporting women. Lots of men do support women. But one of the things I have come to realise in the last 10 years or so is as it's become much more generally understood, there's a lot of research into this, and also because I joined a research business that actually did some implicit association research into gender biases, is really understanding the unconscious bias that people carry within them, men and women, about what a leader should look like. So it is at that time that you start to realise, or I started to realise, that perhaps things that I thought were about me were actually to do with unconscious bias and me not looking like the expectations of a leader, which are, of course, to be a tall man with a loud voice rather than a woman with a softer voice. So just understanding that unconscious bias that unfortunately many people carry within them, and actually thinking about ways to help counter that is incredibly important. So recognizing the challenge that we have is kind of number one from that point of view. And then the second point I would say is it's really incumbent on the leaders and the organization to create an environment in which you can have a conversation about bias and you can discuss what one can do as an organization or as somebody within an organization to help tackle that. And that has been really fruitful. Like many organizations over the last decade or so, we've put a lot of energy in the businesses I've been in creating, employee resource groups, inclusion and diversity committees, just creating opportunities for people to talk about the issues that they face and to really show up and be their authentic selves in the workplace and to have conversations about how we can counter bias.
So your roles as chair of the advisory board for Warwick Business School and a member of the university's council governing body, they're very highly impactful kind of positions. So could you share a bit about how these opportunities came about and any advice you'd give to women who might be interested in serving in kind of similar roles?
So well, let's talk a little bit about what we do on the council and the advisory board. So the university council is part of the governance structure, so it's the ultimate oversight of the university, and we review both the performance and the plans, so looking at how the university is doing and also what it's planning to do and challenging those plans just to make sure that they've had that full independent review. And, we are fortunate that the university is extremely well run. So it's always a constructive and engaging conversation to be part of that council. I've learned a huge amount as to how to govern effectively from the way that the processes work. The advisory board is a little bit different because we don't have an oversight role. We are purely there as an advisory group who perhaps have ideas because we come from a range of different sectors and experiences and can bring that into the business school. And we're there to help bring the outside in. So it's a slightly different function. I got involved in both of them really because in my previous role, I had a team in Leamington Spa, and so there was a really good contact with the university. And of course, I'm an alumna from my MSOR, so it was just a great thing to be part of, and that's how the invitation came in, and that's why I accepted it. I always get a frisson. I got the frisson this morning when I showed up coming here, and it's such an exciting place to be. So how do you get roles like this? It is, I think nowadays there's a lot of transparency around how non-executive roles in charitable organisations or trustees of charities are elected. And so there are, in fact, if you're interested in doing something like this, there's an awful lot of opportunities. And I would encourage you just to look out there and see how to get involved. And even just get involved as a volunteer for some of these charitable bodies, because there's so many of them are really looking for people to help contribute their skills and experience.
That's great. I mean, we're also glad that, obviously you're on those two important bodies at the university, and you're a great ambassador for the university. So thank you.
Thank you.
And it seems like you can learn a lot from taking part, and because you said the word skills, and I think you can probably apply some of those in your current and future roles. Would you say that's fair to?
Definitely. I've been inspired by the ways of working that I've been exposed to, and generally it's true, right, that the more opportunity you have to connect with different people who have different ways of doing things, you can learn from that and bring some of it back to the workplace. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sounds great. So I wanted to ask you this, Louise, if you had to start your career all over again, what is the one thing that you would or maybe would not do now in the current times that we find ourselves in?
So I don't want to disappoint you, Penny, but I would not change anything. Obviously, it's not, I probably have been very frustrated at points. And I think my friends would probably tell you that if they were here. But I think that's more about me. I think I'm a perfectionist, and so I always want to be doing everything in the most excellent way that we possibly can. And obviously, it's not always, you're not always able to do that. That's one of the things you learn, right? So whilst I have had my moments, it's just been a wonderful adventure, and I'm really, really proud of it.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's interesting to hear how you say perfectionism. It seems like it's a driving force, but it could be a source of frustration. I think many women listening can relate to that. Was there a particular moment when striving for perfection has helped you, or either lead to a breakthrough or a really good learning experience, if you can recall a story in the past?
So I think what I would say is there's a really great speech. I think it's Roger Federer who gave a commencement speech at one of the universities in the US, and he talked about how he's clearly one of the world's leading tennis players, and yet in every match he makes so many mistakes. And I think this point about learning how to learn from your mistakes, but at the same time not getting hung up on your mistakes is really, really important. And particularly for high-achieving young people, like the people who come to Warwick University, they need to learn not to be too perfectionist, actually. So I think that trait may have driven me, and it may continue to drive me in my pursuit of excellence, but it's also something you need to learn to just move on when things aren't going exactly the way that you want to.
Yeah, and just like letting go of mistakes. I mean, it seems like you're also quite forgiving of yourself, which is great.
Okay, maybe.
You have to be kind to yourself. Of course, we're going to not get it right 100% of the time. We strive for excellence. We strive to get it right. But as you say, learning from that and moving on, I think that's a good approach.
I think the thing you need to remember about being a leader is it's really difficult, right? And I can remember looking at what leaders do and think, oh, that looks easy. They just show up. They're, sitting in the C-suite. They have this lovely office. And the reality is much different to that, and largely because you tend to only get involved in the problems and the challenges, unless you create time in your day to make sure that you're working on other things as well. So the job of a leader can be very, very difficult indeed. And so you will make possibly even more mistakes than people who are working in the same thing day to day or in different roles in the organisation. So you have to learn to forgive yourself, but also to learn from it and recognise where you've done something that wasn't perfect.
Yeah, true. And I'm just thinking from what you've said, does it get harder as you move up? Like CEO level to me that's way up there. But as you're moving up in your leadership roles, do you work on harder problems? Does it get more difficult?
Well, I think you see more problems.
Okay.
Whether or not they get harder, I think depends probably on the organisation and what you're trying to solve. And there is something about not trying to solve everything personally yourself, because clearly you can't, right? You need to be able to find the right resources who can work on something and pass it to them. But you need to stay close to it as well as the overleader.
Yeah, makes sense. So is there a lesson or truth about resilience that you think is essential for women who are climbing up that corporate ladder?
It relates a little bit to the point that we were making about how you move on from making mistakes. I have two daughters who are both at university, and what I always say to them is when things are going to go wrong, and when they go wrong, that's actually a great opportunity for you to use that as a resource in the future. So I talk about having a resilience bucket. Something goes horribly wrong. Okay, it's happened. It is what it is. Let's put it in the resilience bucket. Now you've got that as something you can lean on when you need it for other challenges in the future. And that's, just trying to think of it as something that will help you.
Yeah, that's great. I completely agree. And also a mom of two daughters. I
Yeah.
think I'm going to use that little bucket idea. So what role do support systems, whether that's mentors or teams, personal networks, play in resilience for you? I mean, how have you fostered these connections throughout your career?
Yes, it is tough. So being a leader is tough. We talked about this already. By the way, there's fun bits too, right? So it's worth it. And so being a leader is tough. You are facing challenges, and you're also trying to remain calm in a crisis or just generally. So you're absorbing quite a lot, and you're absorbing ambiguity and creating clarity as well. So yes, it is important to have people that you can connect with, and it's great being part of a team if you're in a leadership team and have colleagues around you who are really supportive. That's incredible, and that has been very important to me. It was important to me right at the start. I talked about the dot-com downturn, and has continued to be on an ongoing basis, and also having the networks outside of work, whether it's industry networks or groups of friends, just having people that you can talk to about challenges is really important.
Yeah, and I think I loved the point that you made. It could be fun too. I mean, it's hard, but it could be very rewarding as well. And I was just thinking about how you're able to really lean on, your connections, and because let's face it, I mean, you and other CEOs. It's your person. You're human. So these things, I assume, at some point can get to you, the stress and the responsibility and all these things that are weighing on your shoulders. So I guess it's really important to be able to have that close circle of people that can support you, mentors, etc. So yeah, I think that has a role to play.
Yeah, and I think you need to learn to manage your own time and to manage yourself, and to talk about the self-knowledge point that we touched on earlier. Really really knowing when you need to take a break, or you need to go and get some sleep, or you need to unwind in some way is very, very important. But just coming back to the it's fun too, I mean, I think this connection with people is actually where the fun bits come. And so one of the areas that I'd encourage any leader to do is make sure that you're making time to spend time with people in the organisation. And the high potentials, the people who are up and coming through the organisation, people on the front line, just really understanding what's going on and making those connections a part of what makes it fun as well.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, already from our conversation, I can see how you've kept in touch with so many people over the years. So I think you're very people-oriented, and they play a big part, don't they? The relationships you build, having conversations with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, right at the start of my career, I was really focused on how things worked, how systems worked, how industries worked, how businesses worked, really intrigued by that. As I've grown and I've built my experience, I've started to realize that all of this is about how people work. And it is just incredible what human beings can achieve when we work together. So that collaboration is right at the heart of it.
So what have you found to be most important in maintaining both professional success and personal fulfillment?
So I think it is really hard, and I think it's most difficult actually for young parents, particularly in the environment in which we find ourselves today. I have so much respect for people who manage to juggle family life and work, and I think it is really hard to feel that you're doing both successfully, particularly if you're a perfectionist and want to be the perfect mother or father and the perfect employee or leader. So I don't know that I have the answers, but I think, they say make sure you use the oxygen mask and take your own oxygen first. So it's keep looking after yourself, make sure that you're making time for yourself, but at the same time, trying to just plan ahead so that you can see where the problems are going to be and find the opportunities to have time with your family as well as the time at work.
Yeah, I love that oxygen mask example.
Yeah.
It's a visual one, which really resonates. And I mean, you make a great point how it's the hardest thing for women, I think, when they have caring responsibilities. Are there any practices that you found helpful in managing that balance? I mean, can you remember back a time when you had to do this juggling, and how did you get through it?
So for me, it was about using the commute, for example. So on the commute, that was your me time, and whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast or just finding a way to get some downtime, or in the shower. I love my shower, right? I can actually spend a little bit too long in the shower sometimes because that hot water is just really calming. So the daily shower, just finding moments in your routine that are moments for you would be my advice. And
Love those examples. I remember reading that Financial Times article about you and your train journey from your home to London. And I think you even mentioned the beautiful countryside views and just watching your passengers and having a moment yourself thinking about what you wanted to achieve out of your day. I think you mentioned as well. That's really insightful. So moving on to the final couple of questions, you mentioned you are ready for a new challenge. Could you share anything with us, what that might be?
Yeah, it's still early days, but I know we've talked a lot about what I'm looking for, right? So what I love understanding how things work, and I love creating excellence and working with people to make that happen. So whatever I do, I'll be looking for a role that takes me in that direction, and also that is, motivates me, it enables me to feel that I've got meaning in what I'm doing. Those are what I look for.
Yeah, meaningful work is something, again, I think it's becoming more important to us these days. So I can completely relate to that. And finally, looking back on your journey, all the challenges, the changes, the triumphs that you've experienced, what is one piece of advice that you would give to women leaders who are forging their own paths? And what do you hope they take away from your story?
Gosh, I would love to finish where we started, which is just remember to spend time in nature, and to reflect on the fact that we are not the main character. You know, there is a much bigger picture. There's quite a lot of research and findings about people at the end of their lives and what they feel they wish they'd spent more time doing. And for nobody has it ever been, I wish I'd spent more time at work. So, you know, spend more time with your family, find a way to make it work, and just remember, life is what you make of it. So, you know, make the most of it.
Ah, that's such a great way to end it. Couldn't have said it better myself, and I can't thank you enough, Louise, for sharing your wisdom, for being here with us, and for just, you know, being honest and open and telling us your story. It's been incredibly inspiring. Thank you so, so much. Can't wait to see what your next chapter will be.
Well, neither can I.
Thank you
Thank you so much, Penny, for giving me the time and the opportunity.
Thank you.